Oh, it looks like it's on.
Yeah.
like a long resolution.
I know.
Beverly.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Superintendent Assistant, right? Board Secretary is going through the many public comments that have come in and getting those organized for us to be able to go through those in a very fluid and effective manner this evening. District is following, mask mandates, so and the proper wearing of those. So please recognize that, and and certainly respect the fact that we as a district are wearing our masks in a way that is appropriate. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That said, moving on to 2.1, our moment of silence. Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Hill, if you can lead us in the pledge, I would absolutely appreciate that. During our moment of silence, if we can keep all of our teachers, staff, students, families in our thoughts.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Contra, how are you doing?
Good timing.
I'll give you just a moment to get settled. Okay, you're welcome. Yes. So the next line item is 3.1, request to address the governing board regarding matters on the agenda. As always, we will follow our 30-minute limit on public comment, 3 minutes per each individual. And Ms. Contra will be reading through the many public comments that have come through, and what she has done a really good job of is making sure that all the different perspectives that have come in, will be voiced. Obviously, not all of them, but a good representation. Let me make sure I'm clear. Representation of the different perspectives will be heard.
President Sandoval, do you want to address why we chose to have an online format this evening?
Sure. I mean,
Right.
I think obviously this is a subject that is critical and very important, and it means a lot to many in different ways. From a equitable perspective and the ability to allow many to place their thoughts, their concerns, et cetera, and make sure that everybody in the district gets those. And just rest assured, if your public comment is not read, the board will be receiving a packet with each and every public comment that has come in, for us to read on our own time. Dr. Reynolds, did I miss anything on that? It is an important subject, and I think in addition to the fact, of what we're going through, having the ability to comment virtually, especially in this evening's meeting, was the right thing to do.
Thank you so much for your patience. The first public comment this evening will, yes, sir. Oh, thank you very much. I do not.
Mrs. Underhill said, watch the timer for 3 minutes, and I'll watch the timer for 30 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are we ready, Mrs. Underhill? Thank you. Thank you. The
We're still not seeing the
timer, okay. Okay. Are you able to see the timer at this point? Yes. Okay. Okay, Mrs. Underhill, are you ready? Okay. The first public comment this evening is from Trina Berg. President Sandoval, members of the board and cabinet, my name is Trina Berg, and I'm speaking tonight as the president of the Peoria Education Association. As you know, having metrics in place that will help guide all decisions about school safety is incredibly important to many of the staff and community members. You have received over 1,000 emails in our action letter asking, among other things, for metrics to be returned. Over 1,000 signatures on a petition has been signed asking again for metrics to be put in place. Please understand, despite what some people think, we don't want to be virtual for the sake of being virtual. We know that for most kids, they do learn better in person, but we shouldn't discount those that are thriving in the virtual learning setting. Learning is happening virtually. Metrics should be in place that help determine when there is too high a risk for students and their families, but also for the adults on campus who are also more likely to have elderly family at home. We must do everything we can to keep people safe, including rigid mask mandates on any campus or school event, the quarantines to help decrease the possibility of spread, and when needed, shutting down schools. Again, even when virtual learning is happening, the buildings are closed, but the school is not. We should be upholding these conditions that were in place when decisions were being made by staff and students for this current semester. I am happy to hear that so many in the community are concerned for our students' mental health. Educators have been fighting for increased funding for many years, knowing how important it is. Imagine the extra support we could have provided to our students during these difficult times if the override increase had passed a few years ago and we were able to hire the mental health staff we were planning to. Since we can all agree on the importance of this, I look forward to standing with our community members to fight for that increased funding for these important services for our students. On a final note to the board, it is imperative that metrics be reinstated in PUSD. Thank you. The next public comment this evening, my apologies, is from Marissa Whitmire. I understand the worries that people have about the decision to continue to allow in-person education regardless of the metrics. However, I think the negative effects of virtual learning has on some students is a far greater thing to consider. The board has done an amazing job at trying to listen to all perspectives, but at the end of the day, we need to consider what will allow our students to be most successful in their learning journeys, as well as our ability to meet all students' needs. We have allowed parents and guardians to choose what works best for them and their student, and now educators have the ability to receive the vaccine if they so choose. Therefore, we should continue with the measures we are currently taking to provide students safe learning according to their parents' or guardians' choosing. The next public comment is submitted by Lisa Washburn on behalf of Michael Murphy. Recent events have given me a perspective on COVID-19 impact on children in schools. My wife and I are sending 7 children through Peoria Unified School District. Currently, we have 3 sons enrolled at Cactus High School and a daughter at Pioneer. Beginning Christmas Eve, my wife and 4 kids began to exhibit symptoms of the coronavirus, and within a week, the 6 of us tested positive. Because you have important decisions to make about our schools in the district, I thought you might benefit from what I've learned from my experience. I will begin by summarizing each of the children's experiences. Alexander Murphy. Alex is a 16-year-old junior at Cactus, enrolled in virtual learning. He is incredibly fit and active, an elite cross-country and track runner. Within 24 hours of his symptoms, Alex had a temperature of 104.5. He became weak and lethargic. He lost his sense of taste and smell. He had chills, body aches, shortness of breath, fatigue, and headaches. As a runner, Alex is very thin. He weighed 126 before Christmas, and 13 days later, he'd lost 13 pounds. On January 4th, Alex had improved to the point where he was able to resume virtual learning. He's recovered from COVID, but continues to exhibit significant respiratory issues and is being treated with medication and inhalers. Jack Murphy is a 14-year-old freshman at Cactus. For 8 days, Jack had fever and chills, body aches, and headaches. His symptoms were far less severe than Alex's. However, he too lost weight, 8 pounds in 8 days. His high temperature was 103, and he's now recovered and no longer contagious. If he was enrolled in on-campus learning, he may have been able to return to school on January 4th. Joe is Jack's twin brother, enrolled in virtual learning. He was the last to exhibit symptoms. Even then, when I asked how he was feeling on December 28th, he said fine. I took his temperature anyway, and it was 101. Over the ensuing days, Joe had temperatures in excess of 101 for nearly 14 days. On January 3rd, his fever spiked to 104, then 103.5 on January 4th. Also, he lost his sense of taste. Joseph presents a different experience from his siblings that the district should consider. He looks good, feels good, and yet he's been walking around with high fevers. From my experience, if he was enrolled at Cactus rather than in virtual, none of his teachers, classmates, or staff would have detected any symptoms unless they did what I did and take his temperature, even though he did not look sick. Joe has recovered from COVID but continues to exhibit ongoing issues. Sky Murphy turned 10 on Christmas Day, and on December 27th had a fever, fatigue, and headaches.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you. The next public comment is from Jennifer Shreve. I believe that schools are safe and being in person is what is best for kids, and I believe that teachers are safe at school and that the numbers do not warrant us going online. The next public comment is from Jessica Shelton. As a parent and teacher in the district, I felt safe coming back into the classroom and sending my children because I trusted the school district to follow the metrics. The change was made after the cutoff date for switching my children or with enough time for me to apply for an online position. Even if you could not go back to virtual until it is safe, there could have been at least a 2-week break to allow quarantine for students coming back from visits after winter break. I feel lied to. The next public comment is from Emily Wagner. Currently, there is an overwhelming amount of data, and while it is easy to get caught up in different demographics, this overwhelming amount of information has also an incredibly humbling effect. Forget all the noise and forget the outside pressures, forget the politics, and refocus on what matters most, our children, and the answer is logical and clear. Schools need to be looked at individually using district-specific data and decisions made fluidly based on active cases at each individual location. This is the only way to ensure that students' educational needs are met, teachers and families remain safe, and disruptions are minimized. We are proud to be a part of the PUSD family where the science is clear, families have the freedom of choice, and teachers and staff are essential. As Governor Ducey said yesterday, extreme measures by well-intentioned people have unintended consequences that actually do far more harm than good. We are tired of the perpetual barriers that continue to hurt our children. Our students belong in the classroom. Thank you. The next public comment is from Molly Glosser. Please excuse if I mispronounce the name. The community, families, and teachers were told the metrics would be considered, and we all took you at your word and your votes. Then suddenly the metrics were thrown out, disregarded by all board members in December. The board seems to not have any idea what they're doing. Every meeting is an ask and a plea for information. District administration brings it to you and you are still not convinced it's a serious problem. You pulled out the rug from the entire community. Hospitals are full, people are dead. There are 37 students in a high school class. Please acknowledge that Governor Ducey gave his State of the State address bashing teachers virtually. You are limiting seats in this meeting and streaming virtually from this room. the conference room you sit in tonight, appropriately physically distanced according to the CDC guidelines, yet you feel it's best to cram students into classes and continue to be hypocrites. What is good and safe for you is not necessary for our students, teachers, and by extension, their families. You have decided you are worth the effort, but they are not. It is shameful that you sit here every 2 weeks, and continue to ignore your community. Reinstate the metrics and fulfill the pledge you gave to all employees. The next comment is from Angie Fishman. I would like to thank the board for their efforts in making sure kids have the option to in-person learning. I appreciate the continued efforts to closely monitor the numbers in the district. It is important that we keep our eyes on COVID. However, it is not helpful or even relevant to use the state of Arizona stats or metrics. We need to be concerned with our numbers that are having an impact on us at a local level when it comes to deciding if our children are safe to learn in person. Today, I ask you to keep using the PUSD dashboard to monitor COVID as it relates to the district and keep our kids' option to in-person learning open. Thank you for your time. The next public comment comes from Robert Taylor. The board has made a major mistake by telling the community and the teachers who work for the Peoria Unified School District that based on their research, along with the Arizona Department of Health, major benchmarks would be set to determine when it would be safe to have in-person learning and when it would not be safe, and a need to return to virtual would be necessary. Then these metrics were changed as the community infection rate creeped closer to said metrics. Finally, the metrics were thrown out completely once the board saw that our community was going to far surpass said metrics. In fact, the board knows well that the setting of any metrics at this time is pointless, as the board simply wants in-person learning to be an option regardless of community infection rates. Apparently, our community doesn't have any responsibility in slowing this infection rate. I challenge the board to simply state that no matter how bad our metrics in Arizona become, we are now one of the worst in the world, that in-person learning will remain an option regardless of public health as it relates to COVID. At least then people can feel that the board is being honest, whether they agree with the approach or not, because one of the reasons people in our community and many teachers have become so upset is due to the fact that the board was disingenuous and misled those under their care and guidance. Being completely forthright and transparent from this point forward might restore some semblance of goodwill and allow teachers and parents to decide if this district is the one they want to move forward with during this pandemic and beyond. Thank you for your time. The next public comment is from Kristen Goodman. Good evening. While I understand some teachers and parents would want the metrics reinstated, I do not agree with it. These metrics were created before we had any solid information on how COVID may or may not spread within schools. We now know that students are not spreading COVID within the classroom. In fact, it has been determined by many professionals that school is the safest place for our students. So instead of focusing on the metrics, we should focus on prevention, enforcement of mask wearing, sanitizing classrooms and high traffic touch points throughout the day, and deep cleaning procedures at the end of the day. And all school staff should be encouraged to get the immunization if the metrics are needed to help staff feel safe. I ask you to please create your own PUSD specific set of metrics, focus on percent positive within our schools, hospitalizations within our schools, and transmissions rates within our schools. Right now, closing schools would be unjustified because our numbers prove that it is safe. Thank you for your time. Next public comment is from James Haas. My concern rests in the decision to ignore the metrics. Keeping schools open is what everyone wants, but we need to guide our decisions based on data and not politics. To refute the data and decide to stay open despite recent numbers goes against the messaging we gave our staff and families at the start of the school year. While schools are doing a great job at mitigating the spread and have excellent safety practices in place, higher numbers only put teachers at greater risk. Kids will be kids, and even if the student's intent on following the rules will make mistakes. It is too demanding to expect 100% of our children to be able to adhere to all the safety protocol 100% of the time. They are kids, after all. But even a small lapse in adherence can put others at risk. Let schools go virtual until the metrics determine it is an acceptable risk to return to hybrid. Do not abandon staff interest, and please base decision-making on data science and rational thinking, not emotion and politics. The next public comment is from Robert Hicks. Simply put, keep schools open. The next comment is from Rita Cavaria. I am a parent of a kindergarten student. I follow the AAP and do believe in-person learning is best for children while COVID-19 numbers are safe and low. Currently, COVID-19 numbers are not safe and low. They are out of control and at their worst. At the start of the school year, the board promised to follow the metrics. Metrics are in red. We need to go back to online instructions while the metrics are red. I am all for in-person instruction while the metrics are safe. Children, faculty, staff, administration, and families are getting very sick. Some are even dying. My own mother just experienced COVID pneumonia and was hospitalized. It is horrible and very scary. The hospitals are full. Per Banner's head doctor, they will have to start rationing treatment due to people not quarantining. Please have our teachers, children, and community to go online until the metrics are safe again to help everyone stay safe. Thank you. The next comment is from Brittany Erickson. Just wanted to share my support for continuing keeping the kids learning in person. Heather Williams. Please use the metrics to determine instructional mode for students and teachers. While I agree that in-person learning is what's best for kids and teachers, the way that PUSD is doing it is not safe. There are 30-plus students in most classes, and the air purifiers you touted as a safety measure have not been delivered or installed in most classrooms. Dr. Fauci, the CDC, and other experts agree that the classroom is the best place for students if safety protocols are followed. PUSD is not doing that. How do you expect 30-plus seventh graders or kindergartners or juniors to socially distance all day when their classrooms do not have enough space? I know a couple of you have been in classrooms. Have the rest of you. Additionally, you told us when we made the decision in November about choosing virtual or in-person learning for second semester that you would use the data to guide your decisions. You have been allowed to flip-flop on your decision, but we as parents are not allowed to change our minds about our children's learning mode and response. Believe me, I tried and have been told virtual sections are full. I have 2 children who want to be in person but feel that the district does not value their safety. You simply cannot allow the opinion of parents and your political views to cloud or persuade your judgment in the middle of a global pandemic. You require teachers to use data to guide their instruction for students and hold those teachers accountable to data and metrics regarding the academic growth, yet you disregard the metrics and data concerning those same children. There cannot be different standards. Either metrics are valuable or they are not. Next public comment is from Debbie Milleron. Thank you, PUSD, for being open for in-person learning. For my kindergarten and first grade students, this has been huge in their learning success during these trying times. With Florida Virtual being such a terrible platform for early young non-reading learners, we are very thankful and grateful for the in-person on-campus learning we have been able to be a part of. As a leading district, please do not take a step backwards. Please continue to offer in-person learning, virtual learning only as a continued option for those who need or choose it. Thank you for all of your continued hard work. We parents do understand that the jobs of anyone working in or with the schools during these times, that it is not an easy task during these ever-changing and challenging times. Thank you. Patricia Haynes. I strongly urge you to follow the metrics set up by the Arizona Department of Health. The cases have risen exponentially in just the first week back from winter break. It is paramount that the board follows the metrics as set forth that they agreed to in the first place. It is a shame they are not doing so. This is not just for the kids who may become ill, but also for the teachers and staff and administrators, as well as individuals in the student's home who may be older, multi-generational, or have pre-existing conditions. I am shocked that at the last meeting, the board agreed unanimously to disregard the metrics as set forth by the state of Arizona. Please change your vote to online learning only. Courtney Cronenbitter. Please do not move learning back to online. My children have done so amazing since going back in seat, and I would hate to see them regress back. I feel confident that my children's school is doing all they can to keep the students safe, and I feel comfortable sending them every day. Sean Carruthers. I would like to thank the governing board for holding a special meeting to look at the metrics data. It was extremely disheartening to learn that this body voted in December to ignore the metrics and to continue with the plan for in-person learning. I encourage the board to moving forward to stay consistent with following scientific data and recommendations from the health department and CDC regarding in-person versus virtual learning. Melissa Briggs. Please keep the learning options as they currently are, with online learning available for those who want or need, and in-person available for the rest of the students. Our kids are finally getting back on track with school and need consistency. The district COVID dashboard indicating cases by campus shows that the spread on campuses is low. That is the metric that deserves consideration. Safety protocols should continue to be followed, including mask mandates, but even the medical community agrees that the best place for students is in-person learning on campus. The choice needs to remain with families and parents. I also encourage the district to work with the county to help teachers secure appointments to receive the vaccine as soon as possible. The district has had the time to put safety measures and protocols at the schools, and now the 37,000 students you have been entrusted to educate need to continue learning in person. Thank you for making our district's students a priority. Marissa Whitmire. I understand the worries people have about the decision to continue to allow in-person education regardless of the metrics. However, I think the negative effects of virtual learning has on some students is a far greater thing to consider. The board has done an amazing job at trying to listen to all perspectives, but at the end of the day, we need to consider what will allow our students to be most successful in their learning journeys, as well as our ability to meet the needs of all students. We have allowed parents and guardians to choose what works best for their student, and now educators have the ability to receive the vaccine if they so choose. Therefore, we should continue with the measures we are currently taking to provide students safe learning according to their parents or guardians' choosing. Nancy Kulos. Good evening to our school board, Dr. Reynolds, and community members. I've been a special area teacher in our district for 34 years. I teach in person and virtual classes for K4 students. This specific age group needs to continue learning in school or virtually if that is what their families choose. Virtual learning is not easy for the younger students. Most students who have continued with virtual learning have a good support system at home and are successful. What would be more helpful for this age group is reducing the class sizes. There is no social distancing taking place in a class of 30 to 35 students. It seems like we are giving parents a false sense of security. Safeguards that were promised aren't really happening at every campus. In hindsight, allowing each campus to make their own COVID safety plan wasn't a good idea for a district that is supposed to be unified. To borrow a phrase from one of my favorite principals, we need some non-negotiable safety guidelines. One being reduction of class sizes with 30 or more students in all grades and content areas. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Nancy. Amy Witters. I am writing to you not only as a parent, but as a staff member. As a staff member, I watched my school go through procedures for cleaning and keeping the staff and kids safe. Although I was leery of how going to school with COVID-19 pandemic was going to work, I trusted that the district would keep us safe. The precautions seemed to be working, and I was happy. I switched my young daughter from virtual to in-person learning in November. At the same time, all the other parents had to make a decision on virtual to in-person learning in November. I felt that we as an elementary school were doing a good job with keeping COVID at bay. And then in December, the board voted unanimously to change the metrics and not go by the state recommended metrics. As a parent, I felt betrayed. When you asked me to make a decision, there were safeguards in place. Once my decision was made and numbers started to creep up, you threw those safeguards out the window. As a staff member, I felt like we are replaceable and that we do not matter. Don't get me wrong, I want to be in school, but I want that to happen safely. My daughter and my students learn best in the classroom, but we have to be safe about this. We need to protect our community. Please figure out a compromise and a safe metrics to follow for not only PUSD safety, but our community as well. Jennifer West. I'm so thankful our schools are open and remain open, but please keep them open. Kids need to be in class, and if you wish to stay home, then stay home. Children thrive in class versus sitting at home staring at a computer for 6 hours. The school my children go to there hasn't had a COVID case in 2 weeks. Children are not spreading it at school. Thank you, and keep schools open. Alicia Dufty. I'm a teacher. This is my 12th year of teaching. I like teaching in person far more than teaching online. I teach better in person, better than I teach online. I also believe kids learn better in person. Then why would I support metrics? 1, teachers were asked to apply for online positions if they wanted to teach online or if they didn't feel safe in person. 2 friends did this. They were never contacted to teach online and were made to teach in person. They quit. We lost 2 great teachers. 2, parents were asked to decide if the kids would be online or in person for second semester and had to reach a decision in November. After they were asked to reach a decision, our metrics for keeping us safe were thrown out. 3, as of 12/31/2020, the federal relief for COVID has expired. This means if a teacher gets sick, there is no funding to protect them. 4, I have had COVID this year. Luckily, it was a mild case, but I still had to stay home. I know people who have been horribly sick with it. I also know a few who have passed away. I am all for teaching in person, but you have to support the people who are taking care of our kids. Kids may not be as affected as adults when it comes to getting COVID, but teachers and staff are adults. Please consider that we have families and health concerns too. And don't say teachers calling out here aren't here for our students. I have dedicated so much time to my students and teaching. I go above and beyond, maybe more than I should, and I always put my kids first, but you can't put students first while putting teachers last. Allison Kramer. As a parent and an educator, I'm disappointed in the message being sent to our community, staff, and students. We are living in a time where flexibility is desperately needed, and our current circumstances will not be permanent. What is the district's plan for this health crisis? Parents were asked to make a decision for virtual or in-person learning on November 6th. My selection was based on the knowledge that PUSD was following the metrics set by the medical professionals and would continue to follow the metrics. After being locked into my choice, the board changed the rules. This negated my ability to give an informed consent. In the special education realm, this would have been a direct violation of a parent's rights. The district has a plan for crisis management, including community emergencies, on-campus emergencies, fire drills, and etc. Where is the same careful and transparent consideration for the COVID crisis? The board could have adopted another safety model to validate parents, staff, and students need to feel safe. But this was not the case. Using the verbiage regardless of the metrics without identifying another line in the sand communicates a unilateral decision to disregard safety entirely. We are operating in a time of uncertainty and choosing to roll the dice with the safety of our students and families. Proponents of the phrase, "the virus does not spread at schools," is, at best, a guess that we will only be able to verify after the fact. The logic and science is unable to state specifically where and why the spread is happening, so how can schools be ruled out as a component of this moving puzzle? We cannot and shouldn't proceed without a plan. Please validate the community's need for safety by creating a temporary plan for a temporary crisis. So I ask one more time, what is the safety plan? Jenny Dowling, please continue the in-person instruction option. My son did not do well virtual. He was on an IEP from grades 5 through 8. At the beginning of 8th grade, he was able to be taken off the IEP because he worked very hard. Now as a freshman, he has seriously struggled with the virtual model. Please keep both options for those that choose them. Thank you for your time. Sarah Scroggins. To the members of the school board, I would ask that you reinstate the metrics that were agreed upon when you asked us as employees to return to work. It is incredibly frustrating that in this time when Arizona leads both the nation and the world in the rate of infection among its populace, this board has chosen to disregard the metrics. I fully understand the inconvenience and the discomfort, frustration with, and the dislike for closing in-person services. None of us is at their best in front of a computer screen. It is short-sighted to conflate these feelings with failure on the part of the students or staff. I have worked in this district for the better part of 2 decades, and this far surpasses any challenges I have encountered. Students, families, and teachers are all trying to overcome the difficulties and the insecurities that have been heaped upon us. We're all frustrated, but that frustration doesn't change the fact that the more exposed we are to other people, the higher the rate of infection will be. This meeting is being held in a room with enforced social distancing with spread out seating, limited in-person attendance. A helpful person wipes down and disinfects the podium and mic between speakers. My classroom isn't afforded such luxuries. My students can't socially distance in my classroom. The number of students isn't reduced to support indoor gathering recommendations. The cleaning staff does well cleaning my room when they are able to, but that happens once a day after the kids leave. I have sometimes 180 different kids in my classroom over the course of a single day. I scramble to disinfect when I can, but it's not enough. I feel like complacency has overridden the motivation to do what it takes to truly keep everyone safe. I've personally lost a family member to COVID. I am not eager to get it myself, infect my family, or lose another loved one to this plague. Please do the right, difficult thing and keep the promise the board made in agreeing on the metrics initially. Please protect our community. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Contra, I believe we have time for one more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Peters. Please keep schools open. Virtual school does not work for all students. Do I have time for another? That one was very short. Michael Chamberlain. I was completely caught off guard by the previous board's decision to return to in-person learning for all students after the break and to completely disregard all metrics. Cases were already on the rise, and the medical community warned it was only going to get worse due to holiday gatherings. Now Arizona is currently ranked highest in the nation for its rate of new COVID-19 cases. Unlike most school districts that are following the metrics and are currently virtual for a 2-week period, we are now seeing a spike in cases in our schools. For example, Liberty has over 200 students out due to either positive COVID-19 cases or quarantining. The board turned its back on the staff of these schools and parents like me that entrusted them to follow the metrics and keep our children and the school staff safe. I implore you to reinstate the metrics immediately and follow the guidelines that were previously set by the board and the district medical advisory team.
Thank you, Ms. Contra. And as Dr. Reynolds' cabinet, as always, again, these individuals took time to submit their public comment, their concerns and questions. So if we can make sure that we get back to them in short order, that would be appreciated. And I want to thank each and every one of you for attending this evening, and then all those who are not in attendance who did submit public comment. It is important to hear your voice. Without your voice, we don't make global and informed decisions on behalf of the district, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. That said, we're moving on to our next line item, which is 4.1, review of metrics and factors that determine site mode of instruction and operations. Dr. Reynolds' cabinet for me, this is a very important conversation that, based on many reasons. We've heard from the public, and again, this has impacted everybody a little bit differently, but I'm certainly looking forward to, understanding how we as a district are going to move forward and leverage the objectivity that has guided us through this pandemic, while prioritizing the health and wellness, of all those that are in our charge, our students, our teachers, staff, and families. So I will hand it over to you, sir.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, Governing Board, Cabinet, guests. A special good evening to our new board members, Mrs. Hill, Dr. Sorensen. We did have a retreat last week where you were able to get introduced and get a little bit of an experience of what this is all about, what it is like. But certainly when you come up to the dais, it's a different perspective, and it's, if you're like me, you feel that initial weight of the responsibility. And so thank you for your service and for choosing to help us lead. First of all, so I do want to say thank you to the board for scheduling this special meeting so we can discuss how we continue to monitor our health data to determine what learning model is appropriate for each one of our schools. As we're all familiar with, at the December 10th, 2020 governing board meeting, it was decided that we would open for second semester in offering both virtual and in person. That was important direction for us as a district. And if you remember, the dialogue around that was because we were watching the trends, and we were thinking that in the middle of break, or potentially at the end of break, we would hit those health benchmarks that everyone refers to. And so we needed direction on what that second semester was going to look like. And so that was an important meeting, an important direction for us. As you know, that decision was met with a variety of reactions. We have heard from our community in a variety of ways. It was also, and I feel as the superintendent, important to acknowledge this. It also created some confusion around, and I think we heard some of that in the comments about how, as a district, we will decide as we focus on school-based data on what is the appropriate learning model. And so I apologize for that confusion, but am thankful for the opportunity tonight to work with the board and work with our community to walk through that. So I hope tonight that we're able to clarify our process and as well as give an update to the board on our operational side and discuss the updates to our mitigation efforts, as well as then obviously seek input from you as we move forward. I would also just like to go back in time for a second and remind our community and as well our new board members that when we chose to open to in-person learning back in the fall, one of a significant conversation was around the policy that allows the superintendent to suspend learning at schools if there is an emergency. And so the dialogue around that was we will open district-wide in person, and then we will work to close if we need that in-person learning school by school if that's necessary. Again, as we talk about that, that's an important piece because I think that's the kind of the backbone of our discussion tonight. Is how do we measure our in-school data to determine what learning model is appropriate. So we look at the data. We have conversations regarding the impact that we're seeing on campus and the decisions that we make. That's the key around how we analyze each of our sites. I also want to say thank you to our community, thank you to our teachers, thank you to the board for feedback on our dashboard. We've made some significant changes to that dashboard. We now update it. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but we update it daily, and that was important. We've added a few features to that to try to make sure that we're getting data out to our community. Also back in the fall, we created a COVID response team. We've heard about that many, many times. And that COVID response team is a key to the whole piece. And that is how they analyze the current cases that we have within our district and the impact that they're having on our schools, on our teachers, on our students, on our families. The processes and protocols that the CRT uses. We want to thank again, Maricopa County. We thank them on a regular basis. Dr. Sarah Scott, we work closely with her. She reviews our processes. She reviews our procedures, as well as other members of the medical advisory team, and we want to thank them all for their support and their guidance. But it is the county health department that we look to provide the factors that we identify for what is happening within our schools. So if we can advance our slides. One more, please. So the county, when you look at all the information, and of course, many of us have spent a long time looking at state guidance, looking at county guidance, looking at the CDC guidance, and they have pages and pages and pages on their websites for us to review. But one important piece that they have, that they provide schools, are these factors to consider when offering in-person learning. And those are the factors that we are using currently to guide that decision-making. So we wanted to talk about those a little bit. If you look at I'm not really going to attack these in order. They're not in necessarily a priority order, but the first two that I would like to draw your attention to are the community spread and the social, emotional, and academic growth. We talk a great deal about that. We heard a lot of that in our public comment. We talk about it each and every day, the impact that virtual learning, in-person learning, moving back and forth, just COVID in general, the impact that that's having on not just our children, but our staff members as well. So those are two that kind of stand first and foremost. But the other ones are the areas where we can dive into and look and see what impact we're seeing on our campuses. So if you look, the second bullet are cases identified, weekly percent positivity, and outbreaks determined by the county. That is probably the most significant number. That's the one that we look at. That's the one when you go to your dashboard, when you go to our dashboard and you see your school, you're looking for those positive cases. We have also added to our dashboard a weekly positivity rate. Now that is the percent of teachers and students and staff who have identified as a positive case on their campus, and that is relative to only the people that are attending those schools. So that's an important piece, and that we monitor on a regular basis, each and every day. Those are those hours and hours and hours that our COVID response team spends each and every day working through those cases. When you look at the outbreaks, as parents, as teachers at your schools, you may have received a county outbreak letter. That data, when we work with the county and they contact us, they're the ones who do kind of that background contact tracing, specifically to cases and the relationships between those cases. And so that's an important piece. The thing to understand about the county and how they communicate an outbreak is that data comes to us in a delayed fashion, sometimes 2-3 weeks in arrears. So it is important that we continue to monitor that, because that helps our checks and balances on seeing what what cases we're seeing within our schools. So those are those three areas. Now, a reasonable question that would come up, and we hear a lot of it in the public comment, is, well, if we're looking at cases and we're looking at those percentages, what is the percentage, right? That's what everybody wants to know. As we work with our medical advisory team, as we talk with our county, the consistent response is it's not that simple. It's not as simple as saying, if you reach this percentage, then you should do X. What they recommend, and you can see it in these factors, is that you look at all of these factors and you consider them all in your decision making. And so what I'm going to share with you is, as a superintendent, when I look at these, when I look at our dashboard, when I start to see, and this is not that happened yet, but when I look and I start to see us creep towards getting over 1%, possibly 2% in our elementary schools, given the age of the students, that's when I start to say, hey, we need to dive into this a little bit closer. We need to get our CRT, we need to get the principal, we need to get the school leadership, we need to make sure we have our county, and that we're having discussions around what that means. And the reason why I say that it is a discussion is because let's use one of our high schools as an example. So if we have a high school of 2,000 in-person kids, we'll just keep the numbers rounded. If we have 2,000 kids and we are at 20 cases, that's where you start saying, hey, what's going on, right? Where are these cases? What is happening? Now, in many cases, as we explore this, we see that we've had examples where why do we have 15 cases? Well, there was an increase of cases with the football team, right? If those cases are all coming from one area, then we say, should we stop in-person opportunities for the entire school, or should we stop the in-person learning for that group, right? That's a quarantine. That's suspending competition, practice within a team. In an elementary school, if we start to see the numbers get higher, and we talk with the principal and the leadership team at the site, and our CRT is asking questions, and Lisa Alexander, our lead nurse, and we say, there are 8 cases, but they are all within the kindergarten grade level. Then what we would do is we would say, should we close in-person learning to the entire school, or should we transition out of in-person learning for the kindergarten class for a period of time? So that's how we look at that data, and that's how we process it. And unfortunately for our members of the CRT, again, I can't express enough. They live it, they breathe it, they do it every single day, many hours a day, and on the weekends. So that's why we hear that there's a story behind those percentages. But that's, as a superintendent, that's when I start to see, especially our older grade levels, our older kids, when that starts to get in that over 1%, when it starts to creep into that area, that's when we start having some more high-level discussions about whether or not what we're doing currently is appropriate. But it's also important to highlight the other metrics, the other factors that the county brings in, because they do absolutely become part of the bigger question. That is percent absenteeism. And so I was talking with principals today, and if you have, if a principal calls up, and every principal is working with the CRT at some point. If a principal calls up and says to one of our leads of the CRT, either Dr. Davidson or Miss Airy, hey, I've got a significant concern here. We'll just keep the 2,000 kids. We have 2,000 high school students coming to school each and every day, and 30% of them are quarantined, right? That would be something that we'd say, whoa, let's hit the brakes. Let's talk about this. What does that mean to our learning? Because if that is 30% across the school, and each and every one of our classrooms has a third of their kids that had to be quarantined or out, then we need to be having a conversation about what kind of learning is actually taking place in the classrooms. So there is a conversation that happens with the principal and to determine. That absenteeism isn't just quarantine. It is absences across the board. It could be not having enough adults on campus to be able to safely open our school. And so absenteeism plays a key role and is a key factor in those conversations. When we look at classrooms impacted, that's a little different than the absenteeism rate. And I'll go back to what the example that I was using with our weekly percentages. So if we look at the classrooms impacted, and you say, if we look at that absenteeism rate, and again, if that absenteeism is high because of a relationship that may have happened in second and third grade, we have to have the conversation again. Do we push pause on second and third grade, or do we need to look at what we're offering as far as a learning model across the school? So those are the metrics. Those are the factors, really, that the county provides us. Those are what we're using currently to assess what is happening within our schools and whether or not we will continue to offer that in-person option or whether we need to explore another option. Which really brings us back to those first two, right? As we look at the community health data, right? That's what sets off the alarms for us across the state. It's what sets off the alarms for us across the county, across our district, and then drives us into these factors and how we will determine, based on the decision on the 10th, how we will determine whether or not we are able to continue offering in-person learning for each of our schools. So I'm going to turn it over. I talked about talking about some of our mitigation strategies updates. So if it's okay, I'm going to transition over to Mr. Gay and Mrs. Airy to finish up and talk about those updates, and then I'll turn it over to President Sandoval.
Yeah, and real quick, if it's okay with the board, and Dr. Reynolds and team, I wouldn't mind going through a few questions on this slide before we move on to the subsequent slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, it might be just knowing what I think you're going to hear. It might be valuable to hear that, but either way, it'll be fine.
I guess for me, the real question that I have is when you talk about community spread, there's been a lot of discussions around or really concerns, around the district following the benchmarks, right? And I'm going to assume that community spread are those benchmarks. That's how we're defining community
That's how
spread.
we understand it, correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Sandoval, the members of the board, and Dr. Reynolds, and staff and colleagues and guests. As core parts of our Safe 7 mitigation procedures that we published at the beginning of the pandemic, we have continuously emphasized and especially emphasized the really 3 items of the 7. We emphasize all of them, but these 3 are particularly important. That is to wear an approved face covering, wash hands frequently, including use of hand sanitizer. And I'll just pause for a second and point out that we've done our facilities and purchasing department and warehouse department have done an amazing job of ramping up our supply of all of those important items of personal protective equipment, in particular the sanitizing machines and the sanitizing solution and so forth. All of those things are available in ample quantities. All the teachers or principals have to do is ask for it, and they get it right away. And then finally, of the 3, always important, stay home if you're not feeling well. Now, what we're really excited about this week is the ability to announce a fourth, or an eighth, if you will, of the Safe 7, and that is get a vaccine. As many of you or all of you know, starting this week, employees, that's teachers, staff, administrators of school districts, K-12 school districts across the state of Arizona, are in the second group, priority group, and now can make appointments to get their vaccinations. Got mine today. And it was a painless exercise, and we recommend that all of our staff, and certainly our community, when that becomes available, get vaccinated. Ms. Ari is going to provide some additional information on the vaccine and the programs and campaigns that her team's been running to support that right after I complete this brief update. Now, that said, board members received an update in last week's board report that addressed the three other items. If you would go, oh, it's up there, okay. The three other items that you see on the slide, or the first three items, I should say. And I wanted to provide just a brief update on the status of those. The first one has to do with the disinfecting of classrooms. And I think you're all aware that our partner CCS, we've had a program in place since the first semester where they go through the schools every single night and disinfect classrooms and other common areas. Now, disinfecting is interesting because there's often no evidence that that happened. So if there's a mark on a table, the disinfecting process might not remove that mark. And so we wanted our teachers, especially all of our staff, to feel confident that the disinfecting is happening. And so a very simple process that was implemented last week is that a 3x5 card, laminated card, once the CCS staff member goes in and does the disinfecting in a room, is simply, they're magnetic, it's put on in the center of the whiteboard in the classroom. And then when the teacher comes in the morning, she or he can be certain then that that room was disinfected that night. Then they take the 3x5 card, put it down in the lower right corner of the whiteboard so that when the CCS employee comes in that evening, they know that the teacher saw it and they're ready to disinfect again. So it's a very simple process that we think is already starting to increase the level of confidence in that work that's happening every single night. The last thing about that is not only about confidence, but it helps us keep our CCS partners accountable as well, making sure that they're hitting all the classrooms as our contract with them requires them to do. The second item I want to talk about is the Clorox 360 disinfecting. Now, that's different than wiping down. Those are the electrostatic fogging machines. And as you know, several weeks ago, we purchased and deployed a machine to every single classroom, every single site. And so what the sites were using those for was in response to an exposure in a classroom or a potential exposure, let's say, in a multipurpose room, wherever it might be. And what we decided to do, and have already started implementing, is now the site leads at the sites are fogging rooms as often as they can in a proactive manner, as opposed to reacting to an exposure. The goal there is that every classroom gets fogged at least once a week. And so that's in addition to the disinfecting that goes on. And so that is helping a great deal. And of course, that uses up that solution more quickly. And so once again, the facilities department, working with purchasing, has ramped up the supply chain activity, if you will, to make sure that we have ample supplies to operate those Clorox 360 machines. And then finally, you saw in the board report that we were unfortunately victims of ships being backed up in the harbor in Long Beach, and so some of our shipment was delayed. But I'm happy to tell you that as of today, every single school has air purifiers for every single classroom and for their common areas. There are 34 machines that are still being tracked down. Those are the only site that's left that doesn't have them is this site right here. And we get those 34 additional or final machines, then those will be deployed into the district administration center. And so that's that being said, Ms. Ari, if you would like to talk about our vaccine program.
Thank you. Good evening, President Sandoval, Dr. Reynolds, board members, guests. I want to begin by just touching or revisiting a couple of the updates that Dr. Reynolds shared this evening. Of course, we continue to improve with access to information. We know that that is a critical step in order for us to continue to keep spread as far from our schools as possible. And so we did recently refresh that data dashboard, as Dr. Reynolds shared with you, and made a couple of those updates. First, making it a little bit easier to navigate, and I'll ask Christian if he wouldn't mind please bringing that up for us. There's now various ways to get to that information right from the dashboard, or right from the homepage rather, of our website. And we are reflecting that information in daily cases rather than weekly cases, so that our community doesn't have to wait as long to get that information. So you can see how we have that tracked, as well as the number of students and staff that are on campus. We also have references there below the chart that you'll see as he is scrolling through the information there, references to the number of students that we have learning both in person and the number that we have continuing their learning virtually. So we're adding an additional reporting feature on there as well. I believe it's got one update on there from last week, and that is reporting numbers at the end of the week from those exposures that are shared with us that do not result in any campus exposure. So it could be a family that is just self-reporting to us. We still capture that data, we still track, and we are still required to report to the county. So we do have that second semester weekly data as a report for our community listed up there as well. Just to give you a quick update on where we stand, if you cannot read from where you are or from the site there on our board, but we have 34 current cases of student and staff cases in our district at this time. And so I did want to draw your attention to that, as well as that weekly positive, percent positive that does adjust each day when we add the cases. Thank you for showing that, Christian. At this time, I can also share with you, we have 1,243 of our 27,000 students who participate in in-person instruction that are in quarantine. And so, that is the work of the CRT. That is the biggest piece of their work, is careful analysis in supporting our site leaders and supporting our principals on making those decisions on who it is that should go into quarantine. And certainly that's never, never an easy conversation to have with the family, but our principals are certainly making all of those personal phone calls to those families and continuing to send communication to them every time we do have to make one of those difficult decisions. You can see as you track along with our data that we are experiencing a similar peak that we experienced following the fall break, right after the Thanksgiving break in end of November, beginning of December. And so, of course, we are adding those cases daily for you to be able to see that and the trends. As we discuss each of those and we make those connections where there could be potential spread or exposure and report those, we are relying on the county, as Dr. Reynolds said, since they are the epidemiologists. So they are supporting us and making sure that we have the information to share with our community regarding outbreaks. We currently have one confirmed outbreak in our district. It's at Peoria High School, and so that information has gone out to that community here just recently. One of the most exciting updates to our mitigation strategies, as you've heard referenced a couple times this evening, of course, is being able to add COVID-19 vaccines to all of our information, encouraging all of our staff and, of course, our community to go out and to get that vaccine. We were really thrilled to get the information. It was alluded to last week, and then Dr. Scott confirmed for us late in the week last week that we would be transitioning to phase 1B and rolled all of that information out for our staff. As you know, that's including teachers, school staff, administrators, anyone who works directly with children included in that phase 1B as well. So those appointments opened up just on Monday, and we are really fortunate to have State Farm Stadium right here in our backyard, and they are taking appointments 24/7. Now, this is what Maricopa County is referring to as an open pod being a point of distribution site. So it's one of the facilities that's a large facility that's able to host mass numbers of those that fall within 1A or 1B for the vaccine to make that appointment and to go over there and get that appointment taken care of. They're vaccinating thousands each day that are in 1A and 1B. But I want to make sure you know that we have also started discussions through the county to host our own vaccinations. This would be called a closed pod site. So we are working closely with them. We are anxious. I know Mr. Duguid, who is leading that effort, has already submitted all of our information to be able to start that process into motion. We do not yet have scheduled dates when we might host those, one of those closed pods, or hopefully multiple closed pod opportunities, but we know that they would be available not only for our staff, but we could potentially be a host site for other school districts and private and charter schools in the community to be able to get really a critical mass from our area vaccinated as quickly as possible. So we're certainly looking forward to those. It would be pairing us with some local pharmacies that would supply us with those vaccines. So we continue to explore those opportunities as they're presented to us, and we know a closed pod may be a very good opportunity to make that not only a seamless experience for all of our staff, but for us to be able to quickly reach a larger volume of our staff members. So we are encouraging our employees. We are trying to show them how easy it is to go through that process. So we did kick off our I Got My Shot campaign, which really began this morning with Dr. Reynolds. So he launched that campaign for us, and we've got some signage that we are sending out to all of our sites, encouraging staff once they get it to hold up that sign, giving them some tools to be able to share on social media with their friends and family. It's a very exciting thing to go through and feel like you're making a difference. I might note in the line, if you do go through the line at State Farm Stadium, they have sandwich boards up to indicate the direction of traffic, and one of them says, "Line and Hope starts here." And so we are spreading that through to our community through a variety of resources that you'll see up there on the screen. Excited to roll out some videos. Lisa Alexander, our lead nurse, who you heard Dr. Reynolds reference, has just done tremendous work. She'll be sharing some of the things to look for, side effects with the vaccine to be mindful of, but also sharing some of the positive things in the research with that vaccine. So we're very grateful to have her as well. So I will transition. I believe we have Ms. Myers to give us a financial update.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Airy, and good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, Dr. Reynolds. As you know, over the last 6+ months, I have provided information on COVID-19 federal grants and COVID-19 related outcomes that have impacted funding and the operations of the district. First, I would like to provide a final update on the Enrollment Stabilization Grant Program that was managed through the Governor's Office to provide school districts with a one-time formula award based on the greater of 105% of the school district's 2021. I apologize, I'm having a problem breathing here. If you'll allow me to come back to this slide, please. Thank you. Am I to this slide? Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes with the mask, I need to catch my breath. So let me go ahead and start that, if I may. First, I'd like to provide a final update on the Enrollment Stabilization Grant that was managed through the Governor's Office to provide school districts with a one-time formula award based on the greater of 105% of the school district's 2021 40th day weighted average daily membership, or 98% of the actual 2020 weighted ADM. $370 million was made available by the Governor's Office from Corona relief funds for this purpose. Statewide eligible school district funding amounts were published by the Arizona Department of Education in December and were in excess of $615 million, which exceeded the available $370 million of available funding by over $245 million. So in other words, the calculated need statewide exceeded the available funding by $245 million. To address this funding shortfall, final school district awards were proportionately reduced by the Governor's Office. The effect was that any school district award that exceeded $500 per pupil based on that district's enrollment was reduced, and redistributed based on the district's relative share of the original. To quantify this reduction, in the fall of 2020, Arizona school districts used an estimator that was generated through the school finance community to estimate what funding, or which funding criteria, rather, they qualified for, and the estimated amount of stabilization funding. Based on the 40th day enrollment numbers, Peoria Unified qualified for the first criteria, the 98% of the 2019-2020 ADM. And initial stabilization funding projections were estimated to be approximately $14.5 million to $15 million. In December of 2020, the Arizona Department of Education calculated a $16.1 million enrollment stabilization grant amount for Peoria Unified, which included our 40th day attendance and distance learning information that was reported by the district. However, as I mentioned earlier, there was a statewide proportionate reduction of the funding, and therefore Peoria Unified's final ESG grant award was $11,431,732, which was $4.7 million lower than the final ADE calculated amount. Now, I'm going to move to the third bullet point to add comments related to distance learning, and then I'll speak to both the first bullet point and the third in tandem. So another funding consideration this year is the distance learning funding reduction that all school districts here in Arizona are facing. The governor's 2020 executive orders required students participating in distance learning to be funded in the same way as Arizona online instruction students. AOI, which is Arizona Online Instruction, is funded at 95% for full-time AOI or 85% for part-time AOI, compared to 100% ADM for in-person learning. ADM means average daily membership, which is based on our student enrollment. The reduction affects the total ADM that is used to calculate the base support level funding that is received by the school district during the fiscal year. So ADM is calculated at the 40th day and 100th day. However, distance learning and AOI reporting is also affected by the total numbers of days of instruction for a school year, which for Peoria Unified is 180 days. Arizona Department of Education published initial funding reductions for distance learning in January 2021 for Arizona school districts, which was based on the percentage of distance learning through the 40th day of instruction, which I've shared previously was September 30th, 2020. The ADE calculated funding reduction for the Peoria district was $9,143,136, and the total statewide reduction for all districts and charters was $266 million. Distance learning amounts will be updated by ADE based on the percentage of instruction that is distance learning for the entire year. And Peoria Unified will be notified of the final adjustment in the late spring. So looking at both factors, reduced enrollment, and you'll recall back in December, we revised our budget to recognize the reduction in ADM that we've had to date, about 1,600 students, or 4.5%. Our budget was reduced by $11,320,490. And if you add that to the distance learning reduction of $9,143,136, the combined total is $20,463,626, compared to the enrollment stabilization grant funding of $11,431,732, which is a delta or a difference of just over $9 million. You may recall back in the fall I mentioned we were estimating an impact of $5.1 million. It's now $9 million, in part because of that proportionate reduction with the enrollment stabilization grant. Now with that, I'll move to the elementary and secondary school Education Emergency Relief Fund grant, which is also known as ESSER. And I'd like to summarize information that I've previously shared regarding the awarded amount that Peoria Unified received based on our Title I-A eligibility through the state of Arizona. And I've mentioned in the past that the dollar amount of the original ESSER award is $4,230,398. It's a federal reimbursement grant awarded for eligible coronavirus expenditures incurred from March of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. So it actually extends into the next fiscal year. At this point in time, the district has fully expended and/or encumbered the original grant allocation that includes reimbursements for personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, that Mr. Gay spoke about earlier, sanitation equipment, technology, software, and facility cleaning expenses. And last, I'd like to mention new funding. In fact, federal COVID-19 relief legislation, as you know, originally was passed in March of 2020. Well, there's actually a second package that was approved in December. It's referred to as the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations CRRSA Act that was passed by Congress in December of 2020. The Peoria Unified School District is monitoring the details of this new legislation as it becomes available through information that is published through ADE, as well as the governor's office and other state agencies. Although information is still being compiled, we are able to share some preliminary details that includes new federal funding for what is now being referred to as ESSER 2 or 2.0. The Arizona funding amount under ESSER 2 is estimated to be $1,149,715,947, which is about 4 times what Arizona received under the first stimulus package. The new funding is available for an extended period of time through 2023 and has a distribution formula that's very similar to the initial program that we've been managing to date. The new grant funding is also expected to be more flexible than ESSER 1 with the requirements that we've been managing. It is a reimbursement grant, but what's different is there will be funding that's available to address student learning needs that have resulted from COVID-19. So an example of that might be summer school, as well as facility modifications. District administration will provide additional updates to the governing board as information becomes available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. A quick question for you, and hopefully I'm asking this correctly, but the future funding, is that, are we able to leverage those dollars to cover any gaps that were realized in, I guess, the past or current funding? Because there was a delta, right? We planned for a certain reduction, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the reduction was actually more than what we planned for by about $4 million. Is that correct?
Thank you, President Sandoval. That's correct. However, I might clarify. When I refer to enrollment stabilization grant funding and distance learning reductions, that's related to student enrollment. The CARES Act funding, ESSER funding, as an example, is a reimbursable grant to address district needs related to COVID-19 that has a set criteria. PPE is an example.
Yep.
So it wasn't intended to reduce the funding from the state based on a decrease in enrollment, meaning less students due to COVID-19.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is there another slide after this, Dr.?
No, that concludes our presentation, and we're ready to stand for questions.
All right. Board members, Ms. Hill, questions, comments?
I guess I was wondering if there might be a way to find out if there is a particular trend on enrollment. I mean, obviously we have had a decrease, and has anyone actually seen a particular trend from, let's say, last year, January 2020, up through the entirety of last year? If we can kind of see, you know, how the numbers have fallen, and if there were spikes with just decrease in enrollment.
President Sandoval, Mrs. Hill, if I may add a comment, our 100th day, second date to report ADM is January 19th, which will provide us an update compared to the 40th day, September 30th, which had the 4.5% reduction. Our research director, Mike Moss, helps us project enrollment, but it's a very fluid time. I don't know, Mr. Moss, if you'd like to add any additional comments? Yes, Mr. Moss is confirming he would wait to the 100th day to make additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Thank you, Ms. Myers. Dr. Sorensen?
Do we know how many students are on a waiting list to go back to online learning?
Dr. Sorensen, thanks for that question. So currently, and I'm gonna couch this, I'm gonna explain this number in just a second. Currently, we have 28 students district-wide who are on a waiting list to return to or either move from in-person to virtual learning. So we have 2 students at the elementary level and 26 students at the high school level. But the reason why I wanted to explain that number is, which is good. That shows that our principals and the school staffs are working hard every single day. I just had a conversation with Mr. Moss today. Every day they're working to find ways when parents come in and ask to move back to virtual. Where that number is a little deceiving is it would not reflect any conversations that took place from a parent who called the principal, and the principal said, I don't see how we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to be able to accommodate you. And the parent said, okay, I guess I'll stay in person. So you could hear from a parent that they had a conversation and that they're not on that wait list. But we encourage our schools each and every day to make sure that they are doing whatever they can to accommodate those families and those students who are wanting to move back to virtual.
Thank you. Have we had any conversations regarding an intentional use of sections to lower some of our class sizes? When I look at our survey data from the district, when I look at the CTA survey, when I look at the PEA survey, it seems like class size is a significant concern. And I don't know what to believe anymore with all the information we're inundated with. But having high 30s of students in an enclosed space, I think that's a reasonable concern if you're an educator. So I understand sections equate to FTE, and if you're going to add sections, you need people to do it. But I also know that some teachers will take extra sections, so there's some flexibility in that. So I guess I'd like to know what kind of, or if there have been any conversations regarding allocating some of our monetary funds. And I understand we may be robbing Peter to pay Paul, but in a pandemic, we might want to prioritize some of those funds to reduce those class sizes. What kind of conversations or plausibility does that lie?
I know. Thank you for that, Dr. Sorensen. So when we take a look at class sizes and we looked specifically at the high schools, remember the elementaries, the experience feels very, very, very similar to how it did in the first semester, meaning their model did not change that much for them. It's important to recognize that for our high school teachers, it did change. We moved from that dual modality. We moved from where teachers were teaching either at the same time or working through online resources. So they had some of their students in first period there, and some of their students were at home. When we worked with our teachers and when we worked with our administrators and made the decision to move away from that, because there were many, many challenges with that. What that caused, and we've talked about it over time, is those class sizes now look different, right? They are normal looking class sizes, and so that's when you walk in for the first time and you're used to seeing 15 students or 18 students, and now you see 30 or 35 or more, that's a real anxiety for some of our teachers. When we look at that, because, we hear, our class sizes, I've got 38, 39, 42. When we ran those numbers this week, we currently have 70 sections of high school courses that are over 35. That's 70 sections across all high schools. A section is one period. So, and then when you break that down a little further, of those core classes, when we look at those 70 sections, it might be 71, but it's right there. When you look at those 71 sections, according to the numbers that we pulled, approximately 30 of them, 32, 33, are core classes. So when you think of an English class, a math class, that's those sections. The remaining sections are more of the elective experience, physical education courses, weight training. It can include band, right? Other choir, other music opportunities where there are more students in that class, and our principals have worked with those teachers to identify, are we able to do this safely? How do we feel about that? So overall, that is a relatively successful number when it comes to where we are across the district in all of our high school sections. Having said that, we continue, I just had a conversation with one of our directors today who oversees our secondary schools, our high schools, asking again to dive into these numbers and find out where can we continue to improve? Where can we do exactly what you had mentioned? Do we have a teacher there to provide that extra section? And then once we identify those areas, we go back to Mrs. Myers and we say, how do we pay for these?
Okay, I appreciate that, and those numbers are reassuring, and when we look at a 30 to 33 core classes that are over that 35 number, that may give us a high return on investment regarding how teachers feel, right? Because obviously the teachers in our district, they're frustrated, right? And I don't necessarily blame them. And we have to balance the essential nature of face-to-face instruction and the safety of our teachers. And when we talk about social, emotional wellness of our students, we also have to take that into account with human beings that are adults, that we serve, that work in our schools. And I think it's reasonable to think an adult having anxiety to go into a room of 39 students to not feel safe. And when we look at the number of students that are being quarantined, if we can reduce that class size, that will reduce the number of students that are quarantined. So given that there's few core classes, and I know this may not be my realm, I don't decide sections as a board member, I don't allocate those things, I would advocate that we make those decisions to do that, and that would also take care of the issue of of parents making a decision in November, us changing the criteria in December, and allowing students to go back to online, which would also help in face-to-face class sizes. So I believe that allocating some of those funds to sections could help us, so I appreciate that. I also have a question. We talked about the magnetic cards, Mr. Gay. You had mentioned that we hold CCS accountable. What does that look like? Because I know hundreds of teachers, I know thousands of parents, right? I've been in this district a long time, and teachers tell me that their cards aren't moved. So when you talk about accountability, can you talk to me about what that looks like?
Yes, Dr. Sorensen, we have worked very hard, and when I say we, I'm really referring to our facilities department who oversees that program. So Mr. Chris Deeg and his leads and so forth worked very hard to make sure that CCS is adhering to the statement of work that we have. When they have fallen short, and they have, we've had some either teachers reach out to us or principals, or just our own following up as well. I should point out that Mr. Deeg's folks often, I can't tell you every single night, but very frequently visit the schools in the evening while that work is going on. And so they're watching how the CCS people are performing. Now, there have been a few cases early on where they had staffing problems and they were trying to move people from one school to another. They resolved those staffing problems. Occasionally, we'll still have somebody that doesn't come into work, they're sick or whatever it is, and they are right on top of ensuring that those vacancies are filled right away. When we see that something hasn't happened in accordance to the statement of work, I've participated in at least one meeting, but I know that Mr. Deeg meets with the vice president of CCS, that is our point of contact, very frequently to point out where they're not adhering to the statement of work or where they can do better. And he has been, without exception, extraordinarily responsive to all of those. So this thing with the magnetic cards is just one more thing, so that if we have a teacher that comes into her classroom even once, but certainly more than once, 2 or 3 days in a row or something, and that card's not up there, then they need to let their principal know, and that principal or the assistant principal needs to let the site lead know, and they'll jump right on top of that and make sure that there's an employee that's not performing adequately, that employee gets replaced. And CCS has replaced a number of their employees that have not performed adequately. So it's not a perfect system. It's involving human beings after all, but they have done a remarkable job responding to where there have been weaknesses.
Okay, thank you both. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. Mr. Gay, thank you. Dr. Reynolds, I do want to piggyback on a comment that Dr. Sorensen made around class sizes. And I agree with his statements, but does it make sense? I mean, as a district, pre-pandemic, we make determinations, we have caps, right, on our classrooms that basically are set to ensure high quality of education in each classroom, right? The success of a teacher, to manage a number of students, and the students to be successful as well. You know, during a pandemic, and in light of our offering that face-to-face instruction for those who choose to, I feel that having that same level of standard, and I realize there are resources that we need to work through as well. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think it makes sense to kind of look at a cap for our classrooms, similar to how we look at them pre-pandemic. But now we're factoring, safety, into that conversation, which I'm sure safety is part of the reason why we have those numbers, in the first place.
So if I understood your question, it would be, does it make sense to set the class size cap at a lower level? Yeah, it makes sense. The issue is you only have so many teachers and so many sections.
Right.
And so, if we set the cap at 25, we would need a third more teachers in order to meet the needs of those students. We would also, even if that was a decision that we would need to make at the moment, we would be redoing a master schedule and moving kids around. So I'm very confident that our principals have, and their teams have worked incredibly hard. It is absolutely 100% not ideal. None of this is. But I'm very confident that our principals continue, and their teams continue to monitor those classes and are working to make those adjustments when they can. And again, as recently as today, diving in again and providing support and saying, hey, where are we here? Where are we here? Where do you need those additional sections? Dr. Davidson, I don't know if you want to address some of the sections that we have already provided in the second semester.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, President Sandoval, members of the board. Right before we went on winter break, we had to work really closely with our principals to try to determine how we would best provide instruction to those students who are face-to-face or those in a virtual environment, and to try to work alongside our staff to ensure that they weren't getting burnt out and really overworking themselves to try to get it to be perfect on both ends. So we worked closely with Mr. Moss, our principals, and we did allocate 41 additional high school sections to try to make that situation better. To Dr. Reynolds' point, is it perfect? I don't think that it is, but the intent was to reduce class sizes and then try to use some of those sections to make that online and face-to-face really separate, not being done simultaneously. We also did allocate over 2.0 FTE teachers to the elementary levels, as well as, in some cases, to the elementary classrooms. Some of the staff felt it was better to give instructional assistants, classified staff, to reduce class sizes instead of completely breaking up the students under that teacher. And so we've done that, I think, probably in a good 4 schools to date. We also are utilizing our preschool staff. I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Pischke. She's been wonderful in helping us secure some early childhood educators to support us in our elementary schools throughout that process as well. So just wanted to give that information, Dr. Reynolds.
And I'd also, again, I'd like to just quickly highlight and make sure that we understand currently our teachers who have either chosen or been asked to teach virtually, they are teaching students, in many cases, they are teaching students from multiple schools. So if I'm a teacher at Cheyenne, I might, virtual teacher, and I might have kids from 2 or 3, I think, other schools. And without their patience and without their hard work and willingness to take that on, because that comes with another set of challenges, we would not be able to be where we are in that, and that is high school and elementary as well. So I just wanted to thank those teachers for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, without question. And I want to be clear. I mean, the question is not at all pointing fingers. I know everybody is working very, very hard to get through this, without question, including our teachers, our staff, site leadership, and district leadership. So that is absolutely appreciated. Final question around class sizes, though. From what I understand, after visiting some sites, I mean, there are some classrooms that are becoming or having a larger number of students due to new students coming into the district, right? And I'm going to clarify, or I'm going to set a caveat. I'm not sure if those are students that are switching from virtual now face-to-face, but it sounds like there are a number of students coming in from whether it be charter schools or other districts into Peoria. So here's my question, if that is indeed the case, right? If that is happening, I just want to make sure that we are looking to what may be coming around the corner with regard to when we get back, right, to, I'm going to say a new normal, but our students are coming back to a face-to-face environment, that we have room, right, for those virtual students to have a seat. Does that make sense? Because if we have students coming in from out of the district, I just want to make sure that if that is happening, that we have that in our mind.
And we are currently not in our open enrollment period. So my guess is if new students are registering in class, they live within our boundaries. But I would ask Mr. Moss, we can talk tomorrow and reach out and make sure that statement's accurate.
All right. Thank you for that. Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, I appreciate that conversation because I know that is one thing that we have definitely heard from all of the surveys, like Mr. Sorensen said, that, one of the biggest concerns is class size. So anything that we can be doing to remedy that obviously is important, and any other ideas we can kind of think about is important. The other thing that kind of came up was the more frequent cleaning and disinfecting, and it sounds like we are working on that as well. And then the air purification systems, and it sounds like that is underway as well. I guess my question is kind of more of an overall question. Well, first of all, I wanted to ask just, since we have gone back into schools, has our health advisory committee met, and what is their overall feeling around the metrics that you've discussed, the factors that you've discussed, and the process that we're using currently on a case-by-case decision around schools?
So I met with that group last week and talked about exactly that. We talked about the processes that we have in place now. And remember, as they guide us, as they provide just feedback for me, because they are a sounding board that I say, hey, here's what we're thinking, this is what we're doing. What are your thoughts around those things? They have been, last week, as we talked about where we are, and I expressed we're in a difficult time as we continue to to work to stay open to in-person learning and to provide that as an opportunity, this is really challenging. And so we walked through the steps again, and as a group, they were very supportive of the work we're doing to remain in person. But again, I need to draw those. For instance, Dr. Scott, right? She's from the county, and that's why they have those factors there. That's why they have those pieces in place for schools who are going to be open to in-person learning right now. This is what you need to be focused on in order to continue to do that.
Great. Because I guess, I mean, kind of where I'm coming from with on that is, we have looked at other things that I know teachers are concerned about, and we have agendized for future meetings in regard to, sick pay and coverage and those kinds of things. But in regard to the class numbers, class size, I guess what I'm wondering is what is our, and I don't know who to ask this question, but if we were able, well, first of all, with the clarification of the process that we're using and the metrics and the factors that we are utilizing right now, and, further efforts to mitigate class size, is there an indication that our workforce would be amenable to supporting in-person learning still? Or I guess I'm just trying to figure out kind of the general sense of, what level of comfort.
Let me ask for clarification. So are you asking if we were able to reduce class size, would that make our staff feel safer to come to school each day?
Yeah, I guess I'm asking that along with the clarity of the metrics that we are utilizing to evaluate individual schools on a case-by-case basis. Because, the question to me, there's the metrics, which are the countywide spread metrics that, have been out there, and then there's what we're doing. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is there a way to reach a place where we can, figure out some of these high-level concerns and come to a place where we can still offer in-person learning and have our staff feel safe? Or is it just strictly going to be based on the community, from that standpoint, the community spread, and we aren't able to do that? I'm just trying to figure out. Because if we go to a lot of efforts to decrease class size, but we still don't have a workforce that is comfortable coming in and working with students in person, I just don't know if that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, so I think the answer to your question is anything we can continue to do to, whether it's class size, whether it's, the air purifiers, whether it's the steps that we're taking with our custodial partnerships. I think anything that we can continue to do makes that learning experience not only actually better, but feel better for both students and staff. And so that's why we continue to find ways that, again, that the challenge with class size isn't, we could say right now we're going to go out, we want to hire 50 more teachers. They're not there, right? They're not there to hire. And again, that would be financially difficult as our enrollment is down. But the key is to continue to find those areas, to continue to reach out to teachers and find out where those hot spots are, where that discomfort is, and continue to try to do more to make that experience better. And that might be in certain areas, that might be class size. In other areas, it might be, what do you need in this classroom right now to help? And then, we've been very open. We can do this. We can't do that. We can do, what can we do? That's what we continue to focus on. And again, reducing those larger class sizes is an area that we're focused on. The last part of your question was around the factors that we're using, and you asked for some clarification around that. And I'm not sure I followed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not, I know that when we made that decision, there was a lot of concern that we were looking at no data whatsoever. And I feel like, hopefully there has been some clarification that we are looking at, multiple factors and working with our health officials and doing all of those things so that we're not just blatantly throwing out all the data. But what I'm worried about is, or that I'm thinking about is, at what point, how do we determine, if our workforce feels comfortable with those levels enough, despite the fact that our community transmission is what it is. And I mean, I guess I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody does until we ask them. But that's just kind of where I'm at with that, because I think our mitigation has been incredible. And I think our continued mitigation will continue to be that way. I'm just not sure if we can mitigate enough to those that don't believe that, we should be, that the community spread is the factor, how we overcome that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So I would say, first of all, we have asked them. And I'll look to Mr. Moss in the surveys that we sent out. And it's, it's essentially split down the middle in who feels comfortable and who doesn't. Is that a fair? Yeah.
In the last Friday board report, I think you got an update, and one of the questions was, how comfortable do you feel with the mitigation strategies at your site and at your workplace? And the difficulty with the question is really, the question is about how comfortable do you feel coming to your room, is really what the question was asking. And the numbers were split almost equally across the board. We had approximately 29% that were not comfortable. We had about 34% that were comfortable, and we had about 33% that were very comfortable. And so if you look at that conversation, it kind of says that some are, some aren't. And that was included in the board report on that Friday. It was split a little bit differently for the high schools. The high schools were probably a little bit more on the uncomfortable side with the negative, with the 40%, I think is around there. But overall, I think they were almost equally divided among the district.
Thank you for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. So a couple questions and comments that I have for you just around the dashboard, and maybe Ms. Sarah, you can chime in here as well. But can you talk about the process on mining the numbers, right, and how these numbers, as I said, as we're looking at them now, are coming from sites, yes, and how are they coming from the county? So, and here's my scenario. So I have a son. Sunrise Mountain, he just graduated recently from Sunrise, but let's say he contracted COVID, right? And I would imagine a lot of data gets sent from hospitals to the county saying, this individual has it, he lives in this zip code. There are some assumptions that can be made. How do we, kind of match that student with our student population, right? To understand, okay, that's a student that is in PUSD, and how does that number get added into this dashboard? Or is that even happening, I guess is the first question.
President Sandoval, I think if I understand your question correctly, you're asking how our principals and then our CRT receive the information on the cases that we're tracking.
Right, and what channels, right, they come in from, and are they coming in from the county, and if so, what does that look like? Or are these really reliant on site data?
So President Sandoval, we primarily receive our information from parents, and I will tell you, parents and staff, self-reporting when they are testing positive. Our parents really have been very forthcoming in giving us information once they receive it. On a rare occasion, a school may receive, or a school nurse may receive, a call from the county that there was a case that they are making us aware of that was not on our radar, but by and large, we are receiving that information. The times that we do receive that feedback from county, again, that has been, I would say, a handful of times that we've received those calls, and there has been a case that was not on our radar. That comes through interviews and conversations that the county is having with the family when they test positive. We have some of those similar conversations, the principals do, when they are following up with the staff member or with the parent or student once they test positive.
Gotcha. I think for me, the overall statement is this, as we collaborate with our sites to understand what these numbers look like. And again, every site is a story, right? Without question. But what I want to make sure of, and what's very important, is the integrity and being honest and transparent with the data as it comes in, right? If we are, and we are leveraging the benchmark and other data sources and factors to determine quarantining, right? Whether it be a classroom or an athletic team or a site as in its entirety. So I just want to make sure that the data that we're leveraging to make those decisions are absolutely, I can't say 100% accurate, because I think obviously there's a error factor, I think, in the data that's out there. But, as accurate as we possibly can be to be able to make those informed decisions.
And I think you said it best at that last comment, and that is, I'm very confident that our data is as accurate as it can be. Anytime we are relying on self-reporting, or anytime we are relying on a parent, a student, a staff member to recognize symptoms and how they're feeling during that day, those are sometimes personal choices that make it very difficult and certainly potentially impossible to say that data is 100% accurate. So I thank you for saying that, and we have talked about that all along. That our data is as good as it absolutely can be, and our team, who brings that data in every single day, works really hard to make sure that they're interpreting that data and they're making good choices based on it. And I would say that we are very, very thankful to our parents and our staff members who are forthcoming and very open with their current health situation, so that we can make the very best decisions for each individual school.
President Sandoval, if I may
Yes.
add on to what Dr. Reynolds shared, and I should have clarified this in my report earlier, those quarantine numbers that I provided you, you should know also that those include siblings of students or children of staff members that may also be in our schools that have tested positive. So I do want to make sure you know that. It also includes self-quarantine. So if a family calls us, and this happens quite frequently, and says, my child was exposed, they're just not feeling well, we're going to keep them home and quarantine them for the full 10 days, or there is someone else in our household that has tested positive. So those are also included in that number. I just want to make that clarification.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, and thank you both. I think for me, it's, look, when you take a look at this dashboard and the percentages, the numbers are low. I just always want to make sure that as we take a look at these numbers are, we need to humanize the data, right? Even though it's low, it's still impacting individual and the family that are in our charge. Therefore, the decisions that we make and being as accurate, as we possibly can in making those decisions is important. So thank you.
And I would just point out again, just to draw us back to the factors that we talked about, and that is, that's why that's one part of the story, because there are other factors that can weigh in on a decision on whether to offer the in-person learning model. So it is a critical component of what we do, and again, a large part of what our teams do every single day, but it's one factor, and so there are other factors that weigh into that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. We briefly talked about this at a retreat, and that is just in and around, the consistent practice of our safety protocols across our entire footprint, right? Internally, I know we have our, I believe it's called employee chats. I know you have meetings with site leadership frequently, but I think it makes sense, and I believe you are doing this, but I just want to reiterate the importance of continuing to either begin and or have that constant conversation around each site following our safety protocols with fidelity. That is just, one of the ways that I think as a district we've been really good at to keep our teachers, students, staff, families safe. But, again, we can't take, our foot off the gas. We need to continue exercising those again with fidelity.
100%. And again, thank you for President Sandoval for bringing that up. I cannot say this enough. I can't say it serious enough. If we have a teacher, a staff member, an administrator, if we have a situation where we are not living up to the expectations that we have set, we need to know. Whether that is mask wearing, whether that is hand sanitization, whatever mitigation that strategy that might be falling short, let me know. We will, as Mr. Gay pointed out earlier, our team will be on it immediately to rectify that. So that's an important piece. We need to know that information. So please, employees, parents, students, let us know.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. I think it's, I continue to talk about it, and I know the district believes in this as well. It's very important to continue to invite those lenses from individuals that are closest to the issues, right? Meaning our students, our sites, our teachers, staff, et cetera, to help guide us and even make, relevant informed decisions, on behalf of not just the 38,000 plus, but the 4,000 plus associates that we have, and then yet in families, we're upwards of 200,000 individuals. So having those inclusive, type conversations just make us better. Can you talk to me a little bit about if a site does close down, what that communications look like? What the communications look like, sorry. I know we have communications that go out when we quarantine, right? But if we have to shut down an entire site, can you kind of walk through that a little bit?
Well, and what I would say is the communication plan is very, very similar whether we're quarantining, as you mentioned, whether we are potentially needing to close a classroom to in-person learning or move the model for a grade level or a school or multiple schools. And so it is, and I think what you're asking is, if we needed to do that, is there a timeline where we would be communicating to families?
Exactly right.
And I would say it is, certainly that is dependent on the situation. But we are 100% committed to getting that information to families as soon as we can, and working with the sites to make sure that when we make this decision, both our teachers, our students, and our parents have an appropriate time frame to be able to plan for that. Having said that, there are potentially situations where that would need to happen fairly quickly. And so as committed as we are to giving all of our stakeholders lead time, I just put that caveat on there that there could be situations where that lead time is shorter than others. But we understand the challenges that families face. We understand challenges teachers face in planning for that, and they need to have the appropriate time. In many cases, we need to get our technology to our families and make sure that we're allocating our resources to make sure that they have the tools necessary to be able to be successful in a virtual learning environment.
Thank you for that. Board members, Ms. Hill, any other questions, comments?
Actually, I do have one other question that had crossed my mind, and we did actually have some comments from the public about this in particular, with parents choosing to go online as opposed to in person, that they're only given, basically one opportunity per semester, is my understanding, to make that choice for their child. And then they're many times put in this predicament where if the schools they believe are unsafe and they want to go back into an online presence, they are unable to do so without just, basically calling their child in for as an absence and just losing that time in school. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, is there some other way that we can circumvent that a little bit so that the kids can either, more easily, slide back and forth from online, or give them another opportunity in the year to do so, so that the families feel like they have a little bit more of a choice, possibly. Or if not, I know that they're now having to deal with absences, that they're only allowed to have so many, and if they want to take a week or two off, I mean, is there any cushion there, or is there any way we can work with that a little bit to give parents a little bit more ability, of choice, so they don't feel it's so rigid, and then they're trapped with, well, I chose not to put my child in person, and now I'm stuck with online, or vice versa, and I put in my child in person, and now I feel uncomfortable, but I can't take them out, and they're kind of trapped in the middle. So I'm just wondering, is there a little wiggle room with that?
So we have asked our families to let us know. We've given these dates to let us know early on in the semester when we were working to open up in person in the fall. And then again in the late first semester where we were planning for second semester. And this goes back to when we talked about those wait lists. And so when I talk about the work that our site leadership teams have done, counselors, principals, assistant principals, front office staff, to accommodate our families, they're continuing to do it. They'll continue to do it tomorrow. And so if a family calls and says, can I do this? They're going to work to try to make that happen. Having said that, if we only have two in-person teachers and one virtual teacher, or our virtual teachers or their class sizes are full or are getting full, and we have virtual classes that are our virtual teachers are taking on a great deal as well, and so they're working to accommodate them, and we've done some things to try to make sure that happens. There are cases where a family may have heard that we can't do it at this time, and that's why we have that wait list for them to stay on and principals to work. But they're working on it every single day.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Dr. Sorensen?
I apologize, Mr. Moss. I should have paid more attention to the date on that survey on the board report. I appreciate that. Would that survey to our staff regarding their level of comfortability before or after the decision for the board to not follow the metrics?
Mr. Sandoval, member of the board, it was after. It was given the week after the board made the decision.
Okay. How long was that survey open for staff to respond to? Do you know that?
It was open for around 5 days, had 2,175, if my memory is 3 days. 3 days open, at 2,175, I think, is the number of responses. I can give you the information of the whole thing. 65% were teachers, around 1,300 or so of those.
I can go back and look at it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. Ms. Underhill? Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I do have a couple additional questions. What is our current virtual class size? And I'm sure it vacillates, but what is our actual kind of?
Mr. Moss, I'm sure you don't have that number with you, but can you give us an estimate on what that might look like?
Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Hill, Ms. Underhill, the general rule that we applied when we tried to do this was that we were going to cap class sizes to match whatever our staffing standard was. On the virtual side, we were going to go to standard or a maximum +3. If they needed to go more than +3, they needed to talk to their executive director to get some additional conversation about what other things could be done. So there are some that are standard +4, standard +5, which would put us around 38, 39, 40 in some of cases. But they had to have some sort of communication with their supervisor before those numbers were added.
Okay, thank you. And additionally, I just did kind of have a question to follow up on Ms. Hill's question about, I know that we changed from kind of dual modality to in-person or virtual. I'm just curious, how are we addressing in-person kids that have to go on quarantine? Are we still able to post assignments? How does that work as far as those students?
Mrs. Underhill?
Oh, sorry. I was looking at Ms.
No, so that is going to vary based on teachers. Teachers have, they have their tools to be able to work with that, but that is a significant challenge. When you, and specifically, it is a new challenge that our high school teachers are facing. If you had students who, if you were a high school teacher or a middle school teacher who was using that dual modality, and you had kids who went on quarantine, they went home and turned their computers on, where you had your camera in the classroom. We don't necessarily have that right now, and so it does cause a serious concern, which is why that absenteeism factor is a big piece. It weighs even more now than it did in the first semester, specifically for our high schools. Our elementary teachers have been working through those quarantines all year, and so they use a variety of tools to communicate with their students on what work they should be doing. And of course, our families have a variety of levels of access to be able to work through some of those tools. So they are, our schools are doing their very best to be flexible, whether it's through making copies and providing that for families, whether it is providing online, whether we have our online learning tools as well. So it really does depend on each teacher and what they're able to, how they're able to support their students in each school and the level of support that they're providing their teachers.
So that said, and I do understand that, that is challenging. I want to make sure that, those students are able to at least access that work because, we've had quarantine off and on the whole time. So we need to make sure that we are utilizing that. The other thing I was just curious about, sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second. Is, okay, for PD. So I know that we still have modified Wednesdays. Is that true? Are we still requiring our teachers to have training, or are we able to utilize that time in a little better fashion to deal with some of these extraneous issues?
And I would say it's a mix, but I would look to Dr. Bell to address that.
Mrs. Underhill, thank you for the question. It is a mix. We have released some of those district identified days to teachers this school year to give them time for planning. We do have we have a choice menu for teachers. So on district days, they can choose what they want to go to. We have tried our very best to align our offerings to what the challenges are that teachers are seeing in the classroom at this time, whether that be online, virtual teaching and learning, or specific content areas, but it is a mix.
I guess from my standpoint as a teacher right now in the classroom in a different district, because I would love to teach for Peoria, but I can't.
I guess from my standpoint, teachers have already had to learn enough new platforms and new things to do online and all of those things this year. And one thing our district did that I really was really helpful is they gave us that time now to actually work with those students. We have a different setup, so we have online students and in-person students all the time. But they've given us that PD time back to be able to really meet the needs of those students that either are on quarantine or are on virtual. And I think that has really made a big difference for us to just not feel like we're in a frenzy one of trying to learn additional new things on top of the new things that we already had to learn to try to figure this whole thing out, but also just to be able to make sure that we are able to at least at some point during the week touch base with those students that have been out. So I guess if there's a way that we can somehow, negotiate some of that PD time into time release for dealing with either students on quarantine or virtual, or however we can do that, whatever we can do that, I think that would be a good suggestion.
Mrs. Underhill, thanks for that recommendation, and we can absolutely look tomorrow and work to identify as much time as possible to give those teachers to support their students.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. And I think just to extend upon that thought is, there's no doubt a district of our size, definitely requires, meetings, at the district level, at the site level, et cetera. But if there are meetings that can be paused, as we get through this, allowing our teachers, to collaborate and, and figure out how they may have to cover, another, a classroom because of, their peer being out, et cetera. Like Ms. Underhill stated, I think that grace of time is important. And, like I said, they're closest to the issues, and give them that ability to work through some of the gaps or challenges that they have at each site, which, again, every site is a little different. I think would go a long way. Thank you. Board members, any other questions, comments? Ms. Underhill?
I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
Are you guys good? Okay. I do have a couple questions. So one is in relation to the vaccine. So I know it's a total, shot in the dark, but do we have any type of estimation around how many people have already signed up? What we might be looking at as far as turnaround for, getting a significant percentage of our teachers and staff vaccinated?
Ms. Harry, do you?
Thank you for that question. President Sandoval, Mrs. Underhill, we don't have, our employees are not required to disclose that information to us. Now, we have put out an informal survey just asking if you have been able to sign up. If you are going to sign up, we'd love to hear from you. That just gives us feedback so we know, from a percentage standpoint, that was just recently released, so we could update you with what we're seeing from that in a future report, but at this time, we don't have that information to date.
And the other thing is just around kind of some HR things, but with the vaccinations coming, we still have lots of teachers, or I don't know if we have many teachers that still are very concerned, obviously, about the situation in the schools and in the community. And some of those have underlying health conditions or family members that do so. Within FMLA, are we able to still, utilize FMLA for those teachers that have those situations until they are able to get vaccinated? I know it doesn't pay them, but it holds their job. So what is the situation with that?
President Sandoval and Ms. Underhill, just to seek clarification, so you're just questioning whether or not an employee who has underlying health needs or maybe some type of COVID-related illness, would they qualify for FMLA? Is that?
Yes, until they're able to become vaccinated.
So the answer is potentially yes. There's, as you could imagine, so many variables that come into play when it relates to someone's health needs. We do work with an outside agency, a third-party agency named BASIC, who is our FMLA, I'm going to say facilitator. So our employees do work with us in benefits, but all their information that they get from the doctor's offices and so forth goes to the third-party facilitator, and they kind of work with the employee to determine whether or not that's an eligible reason for FMLA. So the answer is potentially,
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I understand it's outside of your control with the physician, et cetera, so I understand that. But thank you, I just wanted to clarify that was still available.
Ms. Underhill, just to further explain, I mean, bottom line for anybody who's listening or our employees, certainly if we have employees out there that are concerned and that they have health conditions, they do need to seek support from our benefits team. We've been very clear about that all along, and I just want them to know that that support is there. Seek it, and then at least they can have that information as they make decisions.
Thank you for that.
Good, Ms. Underhill? Any other questions, comments, board members? No? Dr. Reynolds?
Thank you, President Sandoval. So as we bring the discussion item to a close, I just want to again reiterate the fact that we will work very closely. We will communicate as often, as frequently as we can, as accurately as we can. We work to over-communicate, but we will be working every single day with the administrators, with the site leadership teams at each of our schools to be paying very close attention to the data that we have on our dashboard, to be reviewing the areas of those county supported factors in how we determine what learning model is appropriate and safe at the time. So that is something we will review daily, and we will have in-depth conversations with our site leadership teams when concerns arise.
Very good. That's great to hear. Thank you. As we close, I just want to say again, families, parents, thank you for your time. Teachers, I can't thank you enough for all that you do for this district. It's to adapt and get through these challenging times. It's invaluable. And to our staff, our transportation, food service teams and nurses and counselors and social workers, you also, are on the front lines. And, again, it does take a village, and you're a part of that village, and definitely appreciated for all that you do on a daily basis. So, no other comments or questions. I do need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill, a second by myself. Board members, please cast your votes. That's okay.
I
Ms. Contra-
preemptively logged out. Sorry, team.
No worries. Ms. Contra, can you run us through a voice vote, please?
Absolutely. Dr. Sorensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Hill?
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill?
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes 4 with 1 absent. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.